Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to Sunday Live. It's been a while since we've had a non-race Sunday live stream. I'm trying to rack my brain now. It's a good couple of months, it feels like. So, good evening if you're in the UK. If you're anywhere else, good morning, afternoon, all of that jazz. Great to see you all in chat tonight. Spicy topic. I'm going to be joined by Stuart, aka Chamber F1, of course, and Dan from F1/E Reviews to talk about Sebastian Vettel, Charles Leclerc, really Ferrari as a whole, and whether it is time, I guess asking, should Ferrari be looking now to make Charles Leclerc their number one driver? Yes, it is that kind of spicy topic. Not going to be here slagging off Sebastian Vettel like some people are on social media. I'm going to criticise where criticism is needed. Of course, I'm going to have to do that. But I'm not going to be doing what some people do on social media. He's a four-time world champion, you know. I say it all the time. Form is temporary, class is permanent, and all of that jazz. But I'm just going to hop into the waiting tab rather than a recording one over on Discord because I think Dan, for some reason, is barred from the recording tab. I'll have to try and sort that one out. But good evening to Stuart, aka Chamber. How are you?
Hey, Sean. How's it going? I'm hearing this is the place to be to slag off Sebastian Vettel.
Too right. Anywhere in the F1 community at the minute seems to be the Vettel attack zone. Are you well this fine Sunday evening?
I am, actually. I was making a video at the weekend and I was up till 4 o'clock, but I am now well rested and ready to talk all things Ferrari.
Awesome stuff. Looking forward to it. And it could get spicy, Dan. That's one of your phrases. Good evening, mate.
Good evening, mate. It's great to know I'm banned from the recording section. I don't know what I've said, but I'll probably say something dodgy as well today. So just a heads up, everyone. But yes, I think we've got plenty of spice and tastiness today in store.
Oh, definitely. I don't really know where to start on this. I did make some, I say notes, not really notes, but I want to start with the positives because it is very easy to turn around and start criticising Sebastian Vettel for some of the things he's done. You know, the mistakes he's made this season, the mistakes he made last season, Baku 2017, less said about that, the better. It's easy to start slamming him for that, but actually I think we should start with Charles Leclerc and the positives and what has been, let's be honest, a pretty impressive first two seasons in Formula One. I would say rookie of the year last year. He's then gone to Ferrari, his second season in Formula One, and he's in a Ferrari. I still can't get over that. And he's absolutely smashing it. You know, forget his comparisons to Vettel at the moment. He is scoring points, he's picking up wins. Yes, he's made mistakes, but I would argue, Stuart, that he's going to make mistakes and he's almost, I guess, expected to make mistakes his first season in a Ferrari.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with just how impressive it is with him stepping up so quickly to the top team, because we've seen with other drivers, even this year, that it's not easy to even if you've had a really good season, kind of under the cover of a back marker or midfield team, that, you know, you can look good, but can you deliver under the pressure of being expected to score points and podiums every single race? And yes, he can. Hasn't been a perfect year, as you said. I don't think we could have expected him to have a perfect year.
No.
Some of the mistakes were his own. Some of the mistakes came from Ferrari, and I'm very interested in his, I guess what I'll call politely, his self-reflective behaviour whenever he doesn't make a mistake. It doesn't seem to have affected him too badly on the track. But yeah, I've been very, very impressed with him. And I think, you know, a comparison you might make is between him and Pierre Gasly as well, who had the similar kind of hurry up to the top team and didn't quite make it work as well.
Yeah, I suppose so. Did they come into F1 at the same time? They did, didn't they? 2018 together. So yeah, I guess so. I mean, what you're saying there, what I like about him is if he makes a mistake, he owns it. He's not one of these drivers that will straight away go to, oh, it was a tyre issue, or it was the team's fault, or it was another driver's fault. He will say, like the Baku crash, I'm so stupid. He kept saying on team radio, didn't he? So I like that. I like a team driver that can own their mistakes. And I think the mistakes that he's been making, Dan, if he's in his third or fourth season in F1, you could probably slam him for some of them. That crash in Baku was sloppy in quali. The way he was aggressive in Monaco, or too aggressive, you could say. Germany, can't be too harsh on him really, because let's face it, a five-time world champion went pretty much into that same wall. How impressed have you been with him not just at Ferrari, but since he debuted in F1? And do you think he should be cut the slack that I'm cutting him on mistakes, or should I be just as critical of him as I am Sebastian Vettel? Be nice.
I definitely. Well, I think I definitely agree with what you've both said. The maturity he's showing, and he's not even done 40 races in Formula One yet. That is quite astounding. And I think what's really awesome this year, he did the exact same thing last year with Sauber. Just took him 2 or 3 races at the beginning of the year to get used to the car. After Monaco this year, so after that pretty awful weekend after he went out in Q1, which, to be fair to him, wasn't his fault. After Monaco, he's only not been on the podium twice, which was once in Germany, which you just mentioned, and then in Hungary, which he very almost was until the last couple of laps where Vettel just pipped him. So he really has impressed so far this year. The consistency is something that Kimi Räikkönen at the team, he was okay. He was, to be fair, he was consistent, but never really pushing for that podium. Vettel was the clear number one. Ferrari needed that shake-up, and that's exactly what he's given them, that new lease of life. And the pressure that's on him, as you just mentioned, Sean, just only in his second year at Ferrari, he just soaks it all in. And to be honest with you, it's something we saw Hamilton do in his first year, and it's those once-in-a-lifetime drivers and that can really excel under the pressure. And okay, like you say, he's made a couple of mistakes, but again, I think in experience, even Hamilton, as you mentioned, has made several, well, I was going to say several mistakes, maybe.
Yeah, ambitious.
Yeah, that's a bit extreme, but even he's made mistakes this year. All drivers do. So 2 or 3, I think is fair enough, to be honest with you, especially for only his second season.
Yeah, I think, like I say, I think if it's his 3rd, 4th, 5th season, then absolutely. But I think he's not made that many for basically still. Is he living up to the hype? I guess, Dan, is what I wanna throw your way. I said in the winter, I did a video. Is he overrated or is he overhyped? I was of the opinion that he was overhyped. Might be looking a bit stupid now. Do you think he's living up to that hype, or do you think he's still got a fair way to go? I know he's again, it's only his second season, so it just feels like. Actually, do you know, doesn't it feel like we've been talking about him? It's like Max Verstappen. It feels like we've been talking about him for years before he even got to Formula One, and then he's there, and it's actually only his second season. But yeah, living up to that hype. Do you think he's doing it, Dan?
Oh, I'm going to say yes, but perhaps that's a bit of recency bias. Because if you have asked me that same question at the summer break, I probably would have said, I'm not too sure, because obviously he hadn't got a win up to that point. But these 2 back-to-back wins have really helped not only push him in the championship, but I think his confidence as well. And yes, you can argue whether he should have got the win in Monza. I don't want to start that, sorry. But yeah, I think he's really starting to show himself now that he potentially could be a team leader. And yeah, at the beginning of the year, I was a little bit disappointed with him. But I think now, after those 2 victories, I think he's just about living up to the hype. But yeah, the standard that was expected from him was so high. But I think he's just about reaching it.
Do you agree with that, Stuart?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with him. I think the pressure is the key thing, because we've all seen in the last few years when Ferrari haven't been winning championships for quite a while now. It's a real hotbed environment. Managers are being fired, people being shuffled around, drivers aren't happy, and to a certain extent, and we'll probably get onto this, it's clouded a little bit of Sebastian's potential. So yeah, I think of all the teams you're going to be like hoofed into, Ferrari is a hell of a challenge to come in and to be beating Sebastian Vettel on points in your first season with him, which is actually what Ricciardo did, is quite special. I'll be interested to see how the battle between them goes for the rest of the year. But it's clear that when Leclerc's unhappy or things aren't going his way, it hasn't sort of started a knock-on effect and affected his momentum. He keeps coming back to the next race with a clean slate, which is good to see. And he's clearly learning. And I think, like you two were talking about comparing him with Sebastian Vettel, if that's fair, I think the thing about Leclerc is he's clearly on the way up. He's got things to learn about being in Formula One, about winning races, about being in Ferrari. And we can only expect more of him. And then when we look at Vettel, we sort of expect him to have the weight of his experience already on his shoulders.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'd not actually thought about it from that point of view. That's something to ponder. Thank you for that. But I was going to say, what was I going to say? Monza. Yes, that was it. That was my next point on Charles Leclerc. We've seen he can own his mistakes. We've seen he can be Mr. Nice Guy. We've seen he'll play the team game as he needs to. We've seen that he'll be respectful in the overtake. What we saw in Monza, though, Stuart, and I'll come to you because I talked to Dan quite a bit about this on Sunday in the race reaction stream. What we saw in Monza was the other side of Charles Leclerc that I don't think we'd really seen. We'd seen it in F2. Most notably Abu Dhabi, his final race in F2, where he made contact on the final lap and went on to take that win. We've seen that aggressive side. We've now seen it in F1. He was right on the line. And as a lot of people said in the comments to my debrief, he should be right on the line. That is what a racing driver's job is to be right on the edge of those rules. That's my view. Do you think he was right on the edge, or do you think he was too far over? And are you pleased that we've now seen that he is willing to get his elbows out and take that aggressive stance that all future or potential world champions have got to have?
All right, I'll start with the last part first. Yes, I'm very glad that he's clearly he's got the mentality that he feels like he owns the space around him on the track. You know, he's not going to give it up easily. I think he was clearly the slower package in the race at Italy. You know, if you could have ghosting on in real life, then I think Hamilton would have breezed past him at some point. And yeah, I'm glad he's going to keep fighting and not letting anyone take his positions going forward. Since Italy, I've been going back and forth on this in my mind. I still haven't come to a real conclusion on it. I think both of Leclerc's incidents were marginal at best. I was very, very surprised he didn't get an actual penalty, at least for one of them. Not that I say I necessarily would have agreed with the penalty, but I'm very surprised he didn't get one, because he both things I think he did that we would expect to get penalised for, let's say. And sure, the FIA is sort of thinking about doing this black and white flag rule, which I actually am in favour of, because I kind of like just having a slap on the wrist once, just so we're clear where the line is. I think it's interesting that the I can't remember his name though, but the new race director was saying the key part of Leclerc's not getting an actual penalty when he sort of pushed Hamilton wide was that he didn't cause a crash. And I think we might have spoken about this before, and there's definitely a lot of discussion about this, about does a bad thing have to happen for you to be penalised for it? You know, if you do a bad thing and get away with it because the other guy moves out the way, or you were fractionally lucky, you still made a careless mistake. You still put another driver in danger potentially. I think it's interesting that we're sort of getting this consequences being a part of the reasoning for penalties or not. So to answer your question, I'm very, very on the fence about Charles' move, but I am very glad he's willing to push it.
Yeah. Do you agree, Dan, super quickly? I know we talked about this a lot last Sunday.
Yeah, and I think after what happened in Austria, that was a real wake-up call for him. And as we just said, I mean, only in his second season, so he's still learning, but instantly after Austria and Silverstone, he was super racy. So yeah, I agree with everything Stuart's just said.
Let's we'll come back to Charles. It's going to be one of those streams where we sort of go back and forth between the drivers and the team. We'll go to Sebastian Vettel now. It's been a bizarre few years for Sebastian Vettel. You look at 2017, he was battling for the title in that Ferrari early doors, and then the mistakes crept in. We saw what happened in Baku 2018. It was very much ebbing and flowing, give and take through that first half of the season. Then the mistakes started to come back in again. This year, bit of a slow start, but he's still making mistakes. And it's easy to talk about things like what happened in Monza and all of that, but you also look at Canada. A lot of people on social media today have been talking about how, hang on a minute, or not today, just recently, hang on a minute, he has won a race this year. It was taken from him in a penalty, but he won that race, and people need to cut him some slack because technically that would have been a race win. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't win that race. Yes, he crossed the line first, but he didn't win it. But also, it is his mistake that cost him that win. His mistake eventually led to that penalty. Whichever way you look at it, if he does not put that car across the grass, he doesn't get a penalty. It's as simple as that. And he would have gone on to win that race. So I think the point I'm making on Canada is I don't like that people say he did win that race because he didn't. But the point is, it's quite clear that regardless of the mistakes he's been making and how off the pace he's been at times, he's still got that there because he dominated that weekend, Stuart, and he was on for that win, and without that mistake he would have done it. So he still got it. What's frustrating is the sheer number of mistakes, and what we saw in Monza, I'm not going to slate him for it. I did it last Sunday a lot, but it's just ridiculous for a 4-time world champion to be making moves like that. But he's clearly still got the pace to win races.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you. I actually, as you were saying that, it sort of made me think it's interesting that how it might not be worth going into this. I just throw the thought out there. It's interesting that Leclerc's corner cutting under pressure from Hamilton wasn't that dissimilar from Vettel's corner cutting under pressure from Hamilton in Canada, but only one of them was penalised. But about Vettel in particular, yes, I think he's still got it. I think what we're seeing, and I think this speaks to the second half of last year, which we sort of spoke about a bit at the time, in that he sort of had that bad race in Germany and it seemed to affect him for the rest of the year. I think Vettel's 4 good years came when he was in a very happy place. He had the best package on the grid. Everyone was working for him. He was clearly, the boy at Red Bull, as Red Bull like to have. And his Ferrari years have tended to be more pressure-filled, things not being quite right. And I'm curious as to how much of his psychology is coming into his not quite being able to sort of line everything up in the way that he used to, not being the formidable force that we sort of knew from him in his Red Bull years. And yet, obviously, a lot of that is Mercedes being super dominant. That's in a way that even Red Bull weren't. But on a good day, and when Ferrari have a car beneath them to take on Mercedes, yeah, he's there. It's a shame he hasn't been there right behind Leclerc these last 2 weekends. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of mistakes. I mean, he's a 4-time world champion. I always defend Vettel, and it's amazing. Do you know what? He's one of the few drivers I don't get accused of being a fanboy for. But all I ever do is seem to defend him, which is really weird. I like the guy. I think he's a much better driver than people make out, and he deserves a lot more credit for his achievements. But you can't use that and gloss over the mistakes he's made over the last couple of seasons. Lewis Hamilton is probably going to be a 6-time world champion by the end of this year. If he then spends the next 3 years sticking it in the wall every other weekend, of course he's going to get slated. It'd be the same with Verstappen if he had multiple world titles, or Leclerc. So there's got to be criticism. You can't gloss over it and say, yeah, but he's a 4-time world champion. But what I will say is he's a better driver than he's given credit for. I know the car in that era was a huge part of it, but nobody in chat and nobody in the comments after this, and neither of you two are, so brace yourself, are going to be able to convince me that any driver can win a world championship without having a car capable of doing so.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think if you have been a world champion, I don't think you. It's going to be tricky to say because then I can start thinking of people. I think being a world champion proves something about you, even if you can't sustain it forever. I mean, I think we saw Schumacher's return. He had a pretty rough 3 years at Mercedes. I don't think it takes away from the driver that he was, and I think he still was a good driver. But there were times are changing, and I think it's interesting to know whether this is the post Vettel era, or whether things just aren't in the right place for him.
Do you want to come in on that, Dan? I just realised I just threw you both right under the bus with that statement.
No, yeah, I agree with you both. I mean, I was in the camp last year that Ferrari had the best car, which, looking back at it now, I think to myself, why did I think that at the time? But we went into Spa. Vettel won Spa last year, his last Grand Prix victory, which still find that so bizarre. But he just had that. Hamilton was on pole, Vettel took the lead and just went off into the distance. And that's what Vettel has always been so good at. And like you just say, he hasn't had the car that's been able to do that this year. It's not been consistent. We've heard all year long that it's a car which doesn't really suit Vettel's driving style. And Stuart, you said something earlier on about Charles Leclerc this year, how if he's made a mistake, he's instantly just been able to brush it off as if it didn't happen. Into the next weekend, it's a new weekend. For Vettel, I don't know whether it's an age thing, and obviously you could argue he's coming to the end of his career now. He's one of the more elder statesmen on the grid, if you want to say that. Maybe, I like you to have just sort of alluded to, maybe the pressure's getting there to him now that time is running out for him to win in a Ferrari. And okay, you can look at his results this year. I think he's been in the top 4 most Grand Prix, but then he makes those mistakes. It all goes away, and maybe he feels he's got to catch up a little bit. So, yeah, you're right. The car's not been there, and I think Sebastian Vettel wouldn't have been in the championship anyway if he didn't have those mistakes. But it's just it's that inconsistencies of mistakes. Where do they come from? I don't really know.
It's see the age thing. Somebody said it in chat. It's sorry, I can't give a shout. I didn't see your name. You'll know exactly who you are from the comment. But he's 32, I think the comment said. But Hamilton and Schumacher were both winning titles at that age. So I don't necessarily agree that it could be an age thing, but I just think, how do you bounce back as an F1 driver? Now, I just feel like he's on such a bad run of form, and the mistakes are there, but he's not. Again, it's what you've both said. He can't brush it off in the same way that other drivers can. Verstappen makes mistakes. He eventually brushed them off last season, changed what he needed to change. Leclerc makes mistakes. He brushes them off. Lewis Hamilton makes mistakes. Exactly the same. But Vettel, it seems to hang over him. But does it hang over him, or is it us as fans and as a community, Stuart, that leave it hanging over him? He doesn't listen to us. He doesn't even know what social media is. He doesn't I don't blame him, quite frankly, sometimes. He doesn't bother with it. But is it just us as a community constantly going on about these mistakes, and actually it makes it feel worse than it actually is? Do you understand the point I am trying to make there? I'm not sure I do.
No, I do. And I think definitely once the discussion starts going and everyone starts talking about it, and it's kind of like a meme in the sense, everyone's talking about what's wrong with Vettel. It sort of overemphasizes the reality, I think, is kind of what you're saying. Like the way we discuss it makes it louder. And I think that is true to a certain degree. And I think it's very... I think the tough time that Ferrari are having, even though I think they have the best engine, but they are sort of struggling in other ways, it's been very hard to gauge Vettel. Having Leclerc come into the team, who's very, very hungry and fresh and very, very different from Kimi Räikkönen, who's still a very good driver, as we've seen in his sort of slightly more comfortable role at Alfa Romeo, has sort of maybe given us a fresh look at Vettel. I think we saw he had a bad end of the season last year, but I don't think we were writing him off as a driver. And now we've seen him against some young blood, and we are starting to sort of question it. I don't know if it's age necessarily. It's a thing, but maybe the time in his life, the time in his career where either he's lost a little something or his mind is elsewhere. The interesting thing about Vettel is because he's so very, very private, we have less of a gauge of him as a person than maybe some of the other drivers. So it's kind of hard to know where his head is. We sort of only hear him shouting on the radio during races, which isn't really a good gauge, because when your adrenaline's pumping and you're sitting in a car going 200 miles an hour, it's very easy to get angry, and it doesn't necessarily mean that's the kind of person that he is. I'm kind of going in circles with this, but yeah, I think we do exacerbate it. I don't think Vettel is as bad as maybe the conversation suggests, but I think this is the year that we're starting to ask questions that we always inevitably do in someone's career.
It does feel like, I said it on Sunday, it does feel like a changing of the guard at the moment. We got Verstappen, or not, a new era, and at Ferrari that feels like that's what this stream's kind of going to come down to at the end of it all, a changing of the guard. That's what it feels like with Leclerc. He's rocked up. People were really peed off in the winter saying that Kimi Räikkönen would do a better job than Leclerc. I think Leclerc's done a really good job this season, and it just feels like maybe we're at that point. We've seen it so many times in F1, so many times. I'm not going to start naming them all, but of drivers that get a youngster put alongside them, and then that youngster comes along and starts to show them up. And yeah, and Formula's a different beast now. It used to be, you look at Damon Hill, he was like 907 when he first entered Formula One. He was old by today's standards. And then you've got kids at 18, 19 years old. That's the future now. Even Renault, we're going to talk about them in a bit, looking at their future and wanting a young driver in for 2021. Maybe it's time that Ferrari let that change happen. I guess is kind of, I don't want to go too early with the question here because that's kind of the crux of the stream, and we might as well just disappear after that. But yeah, I'm just waffling on because I've just seen a really good comment from Annette, who is, for whatever reason, well, she's in Australia because she lives there, but for whatever reason, she's still awake watching the stream. You're mad, but we love it. It says, is he overdriving because he has put so much pressure on himself with those mistakes? It's a great point, Dan. And if a driver makes those mistakes and needs to bounce back, the pressure's on from the team, the pressure's on from themselves. And if you're under pressure, you could be more susceptible to mistakes.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I think, especially with, like I said earlier, with Leclerc, he's got arguably hundreds of races left in his career. Vettel, not so much. Even if he does a Kimi Raikkonen and goes for the next 5 years, I think he really has to try and prove himself. I mean, 4 world champions, does he really? But I think at least with the Tifosi, prove that he's worthy of being a Ferrari world champion. And so, yes, I think what Annette's just said there with Vettel, it just seems to be snowballing. Every time he makes a mistake, he's trying to make up for that mistake in the next race, and it just doesn't help him out. There's that little chip on his shoulder, if you will. And I don't know about you two, but I think even if he gets a win, let's just say, for argument's sake, next race, I don't even know if that'll be enough for him because Leclerc has 2. Does that then become the target? I mean, as Stuart just said, we don't really have a very good gauge on Sebastian Vettel because of the fact he's not on social media. But I just wonder if he's setting himself these personal targets that may be a little bit too harsh, but then he's harsh on himself and it's just almost a negative loop.
Yeah, I like the snowballing. Look at you, cliche, snowballing and chip on your shoulder. Yeah, no, I it's tough. It's hard to really, again, I don't want to tear him apart. One thing I will do, actually, is I do want to jump in with something that Juan Pablo Montoya has said. You won't often catch me quoting much that Montoya's ever said, but essentially saying that it's the car rather than Vettel, that the car isn't really to Vettel's liking. Somebody else in chat earlier, I think it was mentioning WTF1 or something they said about how Vettel just doesn't seem to be able to get to grips with the hybrid era of cars. But Montoya kind of adding to that and saying that he believes it's the car rather than Vettel's talent that isn't working. But that concerns me, Stuart, from a Sebastian Vettel point of view. And again, this is why this stream is questioning who should be the number 1, because he's in his 5th season with Ferrari. I'm not being funny, but that car should be to his liking, because number 1, he's been there again for 5 seasons, so he should know how to drive that car. And number 2, you would think as number 1 driver, that car would be built around him and how he likes to drive. So I think that actually speaks almost volumes about his long-term future with Ferrari. And of course, in his career, long-term could be a couple of seasons. But I was surprised thinking about it the more I thought about it, because that car should be built around him, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And, you know, if it wasn't to his liking, he as, you know, he kind of was de facto number 1, whether Ferrari said it or not, should have pushed and worked with the engineers and designers and on the simulator and got that car into position where he liked it. Now, we know Ferrari are the kind of team that are sort of, how would you put this? I'm not arrogant, but that kind of like, we designed the best cars and you just race them. And that's a bit old school Ferrari, but there's a slightly different relationship with Ferrari and their drivers than maybe a sort of a symbiotic one that Vettel had with Red Bull or Hamilton had with Mercedes. But I really think, you know, as lead driver, you do try and push the development of the car to suit your style. I think Ferrari have clearly struggled to get that car into a sweet place with not just the new regulations, but the several series of regulations over the last sort of 10 years, and never been quite there. And maybe they do need to think about working more closely with their drivers to get it right. I can't say what's actually happening behind the scenes, but, you know, I mean, you make a very good point. whether it's a matter of Vettel or a matter of Ferrari, there needs to be a conversation there where they get the driver and car working harmoniously.
Yeah, I just found it odd that I know that ifs and buts and all of that, but it should be built, just in my head, it should be built around him because he's been there for 5 years. And, Verstappen's been at Red Bull for X amount of years now, so that car is probably built around him now, certainly will be next year. Ricciardo, if he's going to be sticking around at Renault long term, that car could end up being built around him, probably more likely Ocon, if we go by the rumours that are out today, but we'll go over that a little bit later. And you look at Mercedes, that car is, I would say, built around Hamilton. Would we agree? That's the Hamilton car? That's his team?
Yeah, that's fair.
It's a bit more difficult, Mercedes, because Bottas is actually pretty quick in that car. But yeah, teams tend to pick a driver to build around, and I just assume that it would be Vettel, given that he's been there 5 years. So that was the issue, not the issue, but that was the biggest takeaway from that comment from Montoya for me. But do you think, as a 4-time world champion, Dan, he should be able to adapt to that car? This isn't the first time we've heard this as well. We had it with Red Bull, didn't we? All that talk in 2014 about how much he struggled with the new cars. So is that fair that as a 4-time world champion he should be able to hop in that car and make it do what he wants it to do? Would Hamilton hop in that Ferrari and win the title with it? Sorry, Dan.
Thanks, man. Thank you. I might avoid that.
Just dodge that one. Yeah, I didn't say it.
Yeah. I think because it's Sebastian Vettel and because it's Ferrari, it's something that's brought up. I think if this was a team further down the grid, you wouldn't necessarily say, oh, the Racing Point's not built for Perez. I don't really think that's something we'd look at further down. But for Vettel, I don't buy it personally. I think he should be able to. I mean, I don't think he's actually been that bad, to be honest. I'm trying to think of some of him. I don't think he's been that bad this year. Apart from the mistakes he's made, I think his results have been quite consistent. And I think, again, Leclerc and recency bias a little bit with his 2 victories, but before the summer break, Vettel was in front in this championship points. He was consistent, and I think he was a fair match to Leclerc. So I personally don't buy it. And your question about Hamilton, I'm sorry, mate, I'm not brave enough to answer that one.
just go. Oh no, my mic cut out. See, that was my next point. It's going to be on to Vettel's. It was my next question, which was going to get lobbed at Stuart, actually, has his season actually been as bad as we're all making it out, or as people are making it out to be? Because when I look at his results over on the old Wikipedia, when he's finished in the points, I hope this comes across as it's supposed to, he's always finished in the top 5. He's finished on the podium on 6 occasions. He's had a pole position. Some, I know, the whole Canada thing, let's not get into that. Italy and Britain obviously crashed in at Silverstone, crashed again in Italy with Lance Stroll, of course, but every other race has been inside that top 5. So the reason I want to point that out is because then when you look at Leclerc's results, apart from his 2 DNFs, he's always finished in the top 5. So I would argue, maybe I'm wrong, Stuart, that he's not been as bad as perhaps we've been making out, because actually both drivers, when that car has got to the line or scored points, it's been in the top 5. So that to me says that's where that car should be. That's the pace in the car.
Yeah, it's definitely a good car. Obviously, the Mercedes overshadows it quite a bit, but it's definitely the second best car on the grid at least, and sometimes the best car on a good day. I would say the thing is, not only has Leclerc won 2 races, but he almost won 2 more. One he lost through the car sort of letting down. The other one just he couldn't keep Hamilton behind him.
He got Verstappen.
He got that's right. He got Verstappen. Whereas you could argue Vettel probably should have won the 1 race, and Leclerc was quicker to get pole, get to that race-winning position in Bahrain that he the car let him down on. Otherwise, he should have won that race. So I think Leclerc set the momentum early on. He then kind of ruined it by crashing in Azerbaijan, but we got very, very excited about him very, very quickly, and had Leclerc had those kind of results later on in the season and sort of took a while to get going, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I think we'd be thinking it was quite an ordinary season and Seb's number 2 driver sort of getting the feel for Ferrari. But the fact that he was quick and ready to grab and fight for pole positions and wins straight away, I think is why we are reevaluating where Vettel is right now.
I was looking at his results now. I keep thinking that both drivers have had a massive dip in the season, but actually they haven't. I'm going to read numbers. I'm going to throw numbers at everyone now. Leclerc's races this season: 5th, 3rd, 5th, 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 retired, 3rd, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, retired, 4th, 1st, 1st. There's not really a dip in there. And then you look at Vettel: 4th, 5th, 3rd, 3rd, 4th, 2nd, 2nd, 5th, 4th, 16th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 13th. They've both got two results that are either bad or a DNF, but neither have really dipped off in form. That's kind of why I'm pushing at the fact that maybe Montoya, oh my God, Dan, I can't believe I'm going to say these words. Just trying to vomit. Montoya might be right. Because, again, that looks like where the car should be. It's picking up the points behind Mercedes and Red Bull, but except for on the tracks where you'd expect Ferrari to be strong. Belgium and Italy, for example.
Yeah, and I think another important factor in all this is reliability. I mean, you've just said there, Bahrain, I think Leclerc 3rd, Vettel 4th or 5th maybe.
5th.
But Bahrain, 5th, there you go, yeah. Bahrain, they probably should have won. But then multiple times in qualifying this year, the reliability's not been there. The team have made strategy mistakes. Leclerc in Monaco, Vettel almost went out in Q1 in Monaco. And then I think in France, in Germany, Vettel car didn't start or didn't go out in a particular session. Austria as well for Vettel. So I think there's been some really difficult predicaments that these drivers have been in this year. As you mentioned as well, it's been a car which has really loved long straights. It's just a shame there's not many tracks like that in Formula One these days. So, yeah, I think both of them, to be fair to them, have done fairly well considering the equipment they've got.
Guardian of the Blind, good comment. Both Vettel and Leclerc have 2 0-points races that are caused by their own mistakes. Sean turns to Wikipedia again to have a look. Monaco, yeah, Charles crashed. Germany crashed. Yeah, good point. That is a very good point. But yeah, I can't believe we've been talking for nearly 40 minutes about this, and I don't think we've really made any point. or I certainly haven't. You guys have been spot on as ever. Let's stick with Vettel then. We will stick with Seb. Is this his final season in Formula One or at Ferrari, do you think, Stuart? There's a lot of talk, isn't there, that either Ferrari are going to get fed up with these mistakes or he might think, do you know what, I just can't be bothered with this.
I could see why it seems like there may be thoughts that way. I don't think it is. I think he'll keep racing. I think he is still hungry. I think he hides it more than other people. I think he's definitely frustrated, but he definitely doesn't have anywhere else particularly to go unless Red Bull want him back. I think it's an interesting question about whether Seb believes there's another title in his destiny yet to come, or whether he sort of knows he's in the twilight years and just trying to get as much as he can from it. I assume he still believes there's a title on the table, otherwise he would probably just leave. But no, I think he'll at least be there at Ferrari next year. That's my guess. I'm going to eat those words pretty shortly, I'm sure.
See, I'll throw this out there. If Red Bull offered him a drive for next year, I think he'd bite the hand off.
Yeah, probably agree.
It's nothing against Ferrari, but it's not working for him there for whatever reason. At Red Bull, as you said earlier, Stuart, he was happy there. That was where he grew up, really, in the end.
Would he want to be against Verstappen?
That was my next point. Does he really want to go and get battered by another youngster? It happened with
battered by Ricciardo and Leclerc. He can't keep running and hiding.
This is the thing. It may well be if Red Bull wanted him that badly, they might have to give up Verstappen. But with all due respect to Seb, and call me a fanboy all you want, there is no way, as much as I like the guy, that I would take Vettel right now over Verstappen. No way. And maybe you two will prove me wrong. Maybe you two think that you would take Vettel over Verstappen. Dan, I'll come to you.
No, I'm taking Verstappen. I agree with you there. I'm just thinking as well from Ferrari's point of view, would they really want anyone else in that car? Obviously, Leclerc is only in his second year, so they probably want a more experienced driver. And I don't really know who else is out there. I mean, contracts in Formula One are a fickle thing, really. I mean, if they wanted a Ricciardo, they could go and get him. But I think Ferrari at the moment, with some of their younger guys coming through in a couple of years, I think personally they're going to want to try and hold on to him as much as they can. I know it comes down to Vettel at the end of the day, but I don't know. I think Ferrari definitely would want to keep him. And I think you two have just alluded to it then as well. I don't see Vettel dropping into midfield at all. And I don't think Mercedes would want him. So I think Red Bull would be the only option. And even then, I'm not sure Red Bull would particularly want him, to be honest.
I don't think he will leave. I think he'll see out his contract. I think Ferraris will be better waiting for 2021. Just see how Charles gets on in his second season with them before making any... Because Vettel, he's experienced, again, 4-time world champion. He's got to offer them something. But we're going to come back to the whole who could replace him at Ferrari in a bit, because there's something else to talk about. But we're going to go on to the whole crux of this Ferrari part now. It does, as I've already said, feel like the changing of the guard. I feel like Leclerc has turned up and has delivered. Has absolutely delivered. Still a lot to learn. Mistakes are being made, but that's the sort of thing that'll iron out over his career. Don't forget Vettel, kind of ironically now, I guess, used to be referred to as the crash kid when he was younger in Formula 1. Some might argue that he's still doing that now, but he definitely ironed that out during his Red Bull days compared to what he was doing in his early years. Lewis Hamilton used to crash all the time in some people's eyes. Max Verstappen, and look how they're growing as they get, how they've grown as they get that experience. Now Verstappen's growing. It's exactly what Leclerc needs to do. If I were Ferrari, I would look long-term and I would make him number one. But I worry what that means for Sebastian Vettel's future, because does he want to be number two? Because there is this talk that he's got this clause in the contract that says Sebastian Vettel is the number one driver. He will be the number one driver. So they might have to upset contracts in order to do that. But I think long-term, there's no... Again, chat, argue, I'm sure you will. But long-term, there's no doubt whatsoever for me that Charles Leclerc should be the horse they're backing. That works quite well for Ferrari, doesn't it? But he should be the horse they're backing long term. The question is, do they get behind him now, Stuart, or do they wait until they know what Sebastian Vettel's future holds? Is it too soon to absolutely go out and stick everything behind him?
It's an interesting question as to what does it actually mean to be number one driver? Because even if it says on a piece of paper that Sebastian's number one driver, they still take turns between race weekends in like going first in qualifying. They will still defer to one another during the race if they're on sort of, if the behind driver's on a sort of better strategy. I guess I feel like they have put Leclerc on some of the more experimental strategies a few times, especially in the first half of the season. But again, it doesn't seem like Seb is a number one in the way that you used to have number ones, in the way that Michael Schumacher was a number one, in the way that kind of everything was thrown at him. They seem to be given equal opportunity most of the time, and operate under the same rules that kind of most teammates do. It's like if you're ahead in the race, you get to pick when your pit stop is, that kind of thing. But to sort of get the sort of semantics out of the way, I don't think they need to make Leclerc number one. Maybe they need to sort of focus their operation a little bit more around him and take, and think of him as a championship challenger. But I think if they provide Leclerc with the goods, Leclerc will deliver. Same with Sebastian, really. I think just give them everything you've got and get as many points as you possibly can. I think that's what they need to do. I think what they definitely shouldn't be doing is throwing a Michael Schumacher-like operation around Vettel. I don't think they should center the entire team around Vettel, but I don't think they should do that to Leclerc either. I think this is a perfect opportunity to have a wise old hand who's still very talented, not wise old hand in the kind of doddering sense, but and the young upcomer who's still got things to learn about, how to improve and how to be 100%. So yeah, I sort of just make sure you don't leave Leclerc out of the championship fight is what I would say.
That's some really good points there. Actually, just kind of building on something, and a few in chat I think have said it as well, or words to this effect. Is there any point in Ferrari having a number one at the moment? You've just said there about getting the car right, basically, Stuart, rather than worrying about who's where. But they're not fighting for the title, are they? So I guess sort of going back on my own point is, what's the point in having a number one driver if you're fighting for second at best in the championship and you're fourth and fifth in the drivers? 102 and 115 points off Lewis Hamilton, respectively.
Oof. Yeah.
It's big, isn't
Yeah.
it?
I think that's exactly right. I think their best bet is just to get that car right, get a weekend together, stop making mistakes as a team.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it benefits them to keep the relationship between Vettel and Leclerc sweet, because they all need to work together to get that extra step up to actually follow through on a title challenge, which they've tried and failed to do for the last 3 years.
So I think my point on Leclerc long term is that Ferrari's most successful era, unless I'm wrong, I'm sure that era with Michael Schumacher was their most successful. They had a clear number one and they had a clear number two. And even the Alonso Massa period, Alonso was clear number one. He nearly won a title in a terrible Ferrari. I just think that's, for me, and I know Schumacher fanboy, and that's the era I grew up with and all of this, but for me, that's when Ferrari work their best, is when they've got a driver, whether that's Leclerc, whether it's Verstappen in the future, whether it is Vettel, I don't know, but when they've got a driver that they build that car around, they focus on, and then they bring in another driver who is a good driver, who can pick up the wins when that number one driver fails to finish or whatever, but somebody that they can have there to move out of the way. Obviously, this is long term. This isn't for the rest of this season because it doesn't matter which Ferrari finishes second or third because they're not fighting for the championship. But going forward, particularly looking at 2021, that formula has worked so well for Ferrari over the years that I think they're mad if they don't go back to it. But then, is Formula One a different animal now? I'm kind of back and forth on this. Do you get the point I'm making, Stuart? Just how that worked for Ferrari. So go back to that and see if it works again, because nothing else seems to be working for them.
Yeah, I do get what you're saying, and I know there is sometimes a risk if you have two number ones or equal weighting, especially when you're fighting for a championship and you risk taking points off one another. I think we saw that with Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber a little bit.
Senna and Prost, a little bit
yeah,
explosive.
You sort of, and I imagine if the Mercedes hadn't been so much of a step above the rest of the cars when Rosberg and Hamilton were fighting, then that might have counted against them. On the other hand, it is a bit of a different era. I think like the Schumacher Ferrari thing started when you had things like a spare car set up at all times, and that car would be set up for Schumacher, and you'd have extra practice, and you'd be able to go testing whenever you want. So Schumacher would be doing laps at Friano with Bridgestone like every week. There's kind of less opportunity to directly favour one driver over the other. And I think what we tend to see in teams now is results will speak for themselves and the momentum will swing with whoever grabs it, I think. Even with someone like Red Bull, like Verstappen is the number one driver because he put himself there.
So if Leclerc were to put himself there, would that be the same sort of... Is that what you're getting at? He'd need to be clear number one with the results, almost.
I think so, yeah. I think, well, especially like if you look at Verstappen, Red Bull will approach the weekend and they'll know that Verstappen is where the big points are going to come from. So they want to make sure he's where he needs to be. At Ferrari at the moment, I don't think it's clear. You don't go into a race weekend and you think, oh, it's definitely going to be a sort of Leclerc weekend. We definitely need to make sure he's fighting for pole and hopefully for victory. I think it could go either way. So I don't think they necessarily need to be thinking like that just yet. But if momentum swings in a particular direction, like it has done between Vettel and Raikkonen, you clearly saw that they were centering their weekends around Vettel because that's where the points were going to come.
Yeah, I get what he's completely. I will say, by the way, totally random point. I've got things written down in front of me that are sort of structured on how I wanted to do the stream, but I need to stop doing that because we're just sat chatting now and it feels so much more fun and so much more relaxed. But I will say this. You still there, Dan? You're right, mate.
You're right.
Your thoughts on all of that, really. Do you think it is time to pick a driver and back them, or do you think Ferrari need to just, as we've been saying, get on with it for now and then maybe look at the future for a number one driver? I mean, we don't know what's happening in 2021 yet, do we?
No, I mean, I'm in the camp that it's more of an invisible badge, the number one driver. And Ferrari at the moment, I think they want to keep the camp as happy as they can. So I think if they keep it neutral, that's going to be perfect for them. Don't out and out, and I'm sure they wouldn't say it anyway. I think they've been very low key this year in saying that Vettel's number one. They haven't really mentioned it at all. So I think the biggest thing for me, and you two have sort of mentioned it there, it's just so anti-Ferrari to be a neutral standpoint. They love a number one driver. And also Sebastian Vettel, the times he's performed best in his career is when he's been the clear number one driver. We saw what happened, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but with Alonso and Hamilton, when they were at McLaren together, Alonso expected to be the clear number one, and Hamilton obviously came in, did very well in his first season, was a clear match for Alonso, and the absolute fireworks there. So I think as long as Leclerc on track can deliver consistent performances like he's done this year, I think eventually he will be number one. But I think internally, there's no real reason to favour one driver over the other, because at the moment, I think they're quite level pegging. And even on points, they're not a million miles away from each other. It's just these couple of mistakes. And apart from that, they're not that far away.
So we seem to all be... I've been talked down a little bit from my position, but I think we all seem to be in the same boat. I don't know how chat feel about it. That at the moment, there's no need for Ferrari to have a number one and number two driver, but that long term, Leclerc could be the, again, horse to back. Is that kind of what we're agreeing on to a point?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it all depends on who they bring in if Vettel leaves eventually. But yeah, I think long term, Leclerc is the safe option.
Are we agreeing, Stuart?
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. I think let them race, and the expectations are that Leclerc will become number one by default.
Yeah, there we go. I saw something in chat earlier saying, actually, again, I need to start writing names down or something so I remember who they are, but somebody was saying there about essentially let's give Vettel a chance to respond to Leclerc's 2 wins. He might, I don't see it, not because of him, but because that car is not going to suit Singapore, but he might rock up to Singapore and Russia and he might pick up 2 wins. And then all of a sudden we'll be going, what are we talking about? Seb's all right, he's doing fine. He's not the dog turd driver that some people make him out to be. He deserves a lot more credit than he gets. And I think he deserves a lot more respect than he gets. But at the same time, as I said right at the start, you can't keep glossing over his mistakes with, but he's a 4-time world champion, because he's a 4-time world champion. Ultimately, we'll sort of leave the Ferrari stuff there. I'll come to some of your questions as well. There is a poll on screen somewhere. I think it's behind the eye, where you can vote yes or no. Should Ferrari make Leclerc their number one? Be interested to see what you say. I'll try and remember to check that before the end. I love doing these polls on videos, by the way. They're great fun. But also let me know in chat if you think Ferrari should be making the change, or it's too soon, or maybe it's a long-term change. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll try and read some in a few. But I do just want to get some views from you two, really, on quali races. It looks as though teams are sort of in agreement about a handful of races next year hosting quali races on a Saturday to test them out for 2021. There are concerns about the costs and what that's going to mean for spare parts and things like that, and how the points will be distributed. Do you like the idea of the quali races, Dan? We might have touched on it last week in the quali watch on. Do you like that idea, or do you think just leave quali alone, leave the format alone, and we'll see where we are in the future?
Oh, I'm so torn with this one because it sounds fun. I
does,
can't
doesn't it?
deny. Yeah, it sounds quite good. I can't lie, but I also have to say I don't have any issues with the quali now. I think I might be wrong here, apologies, but I think it's 2017 where we had that really awful system that they decided to bring in. And what I'd hate for next year, and you sort of put my mind at ease then with what you just said, I'd hate for them just to, after this weekend, rush into it next year, quali races, every single one. There we go. I'd hate for them to do that. So you've just said there that they might do it a couple, just sprinkle it in, and that I'm okay with. If they commit to, say, 2 races, 3 races, give it a try. If it's not good, we'll move on. If it's great, 2021, I don't really have an issue with that. But personally, except what happened at the weekend, which I think we thought was quite comical, apart from that, I don't really have an issue with quali, to be totally honest.
If you didn't watch the quali watch along, there is some great... Somebody put a timestamp in the comments to when it all starts kicking off, and mine and Dan's reaction. Oh dear, we had no idea what was going on with that one. Very, very odd situation. Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, Stuart. I like the fact they're, at least, rather than rushing into it, they are going to give it a go. They're going to see if it works, and if it doesn't, don't bother for 2021. And if it is successful, bring it in.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. In the sort of broader sense, I'm very much in favour of F1 trying things, which I know is a very, very hard thing to do because it's expensive and you have to convince the teams it's worth them doing stuff. Including things like non-championship races where you can mess with the format a bit. I think there's some scope for doing things like that. But yeah, I'm interested to see how quali races go. I think this is, I've been a strong advocate of this qualifying system is pretty good. Normally pretty entertaining, and it's tight, so you get this kind of tension towards the end of each session, and that qualifying isn't necessarily something you need to fix. But I think the weekend structure and on the whole is maybe something they've been looking at for a while. I think Fridays are almost pointless apart from for people who just want to sit in the grandstands and watch F1 cars, and I think they're detrimental. We've spoken about this before.
Yeah.
In the sense that they give too much information to the drivers, and as soon as you have a washout on Friday, the rest of the weekend becomes really interesting. So if we can shift things around to have less practice-like sessions and more race-like sessions, I think that'd be interesting. If you, having watched Formula 2 this year more properly, I have actually quite found having two slightly different races pretty interesting. So yeah, definitely up for trying it, and I'm definitely up for F1 trying things in general.
What about, because I hate, right, I've got to be honest, I used to do practice watch-alongs. Wow, that is a boring Friday. I love F1. I love watching cars on track, but we don't really get to enjoy too much as fans, and then we get to the race and they've all got all this data and it affects the Grand Prix. I'd much rather have less practice. But what about qualifying on a Friday? So like one practice session on the Friday morning, an hour and a half, qualifying Friday afternoon for the quali race on Saturday. Look at me overcomplicated things. And then quali race on Saturday for the race on Sunday. You can tell me to start off if you think that's terrible. It's fine.
I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. The only thing is you've now got 3 days in a row where there's a sort of must-watch session, I guess, if qualifying does prove to be as exciting when moved to the Friday. And I think, I don't know what year this was. It was sometime in the noughties when they sort of did this aggregate qualifying for about 4 races before they go up. And they split qualifying. They did one qualifying session on Friday and one qualifying session on Saturday, and they added the times together. And it was confusing. And I never watched the Friday session because you can only watch so many things. But yeah, I think something more like that, something more streamlined, would be beneficial. I'm not necessarily sure about that format exactly, but something like that.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Dan? Or have you got a better suggestion? You ready for crazy 20 Grosjeans on the grid from Dan?
No, I don't have a better suggestion. Sad. I mean, I'd love to see on a Friday a non-championship race that one of you two just said. I can't remember which one, sorry. But where they're all in just a FIA standard equal cars, maybe just with the team's livery on, but all the chassis are the same. People at the track get to see it, but there's no real benefit to the drivers except just being out there for the fans. Get rid of some of the practice sessions on a Friday and then keep quali and the race the same, because I will just say, especially for more casual fans, I think if you start making it really complicated with a Friday quali, a Saturday race quali, a Sunday race, I think that'll put off some of the younger and newer fans. So I think they've got to be careful there. But again, I think that maybe far too many practice sessions. I think 1, 2 at a push is enough. But apart from that, I don't really have too much of an issue with it.
Addy says, people work on Friday afternoon, Sean. That's a very good point. I think Stuart kind of alluded to that in a way with the extra sessions. People aren't going to be tuning in, are they? There was another comment. Wait, Sean, that could be practice Friday, quali for quali race, but reverse grid, then quali for race, then race. I've gone cross-eyed. That's TV Land 3458.
You could do
something else then.
Because I was looking at that, and that gave me. You could do on Saturday like a double bill. You could do a short qualifying, straight into the quali race after that. Make that an hour and a half, kind of all in all. Just give them time to just put fuel in the car and set the car up, and then that could be fun.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Carman V3 here. Quali is fine how it is. I never tune into a Formula One weekend and think we could do with a change to qualifying, like I do some races that, sat watching the French Grand Prix, you're thinking, they've got to do something about this. But the mess about in Monza, that's a good line. The mess about in Monza on those final runs was the only time I could think of in a long time that I've looked at quali and gone, they really need to change that.
Yeah, and that's a very, very specific issue, which I'm still not sure how to deal with because it's a very, very hard thing to regulate, other than telling them not to muck about. I don't think that's a systemic problem with qualifying, though. You could still get that in every type of qualifying except like one-shot qualifying.
See, Ash Cash, I would be down for Super Pole. Could make it more entertaining and even longer. I do... Oh, Dan. I've already got a Formula E story scrolling along the bottom, so I might be in trouble doubly here. I actually quite like the way they do Formula E qualifying, but equally I love Formula 1 quali. So I don't think it needs to be changed, but I wouldn't be totally against seeing something like Super Pole.
Yeah, I really like Formula E qualifying, although, to be fair, it took me a hell of a long time to work out what was going on.
Just a bit.
Those first few weekends I ever watched it, I thought, what's happening here? So some random people are going out, and then eventually we're going to get to a shootout. But yeah, I think Formula E quali is great for Formula E, where the cars are a lot closer. But I think for Formula 1, no matter what group the Mercedes in, they're going to be into Super Pole. So I think it'd be fun, don't get me wrong, but again, I still think the one we've got now is fine.
Let's take a couple of your comments. Wilbur Fernandez says, how about FP1 on Saturday morning, quali in the evening and race on Sunday, and don't give the teams all that data. Idiot Box says, FP1 and FP2 on Friday, Q1 and Q2 Saturday, shootout race for pole and full race on Sunday. Ooh, so like a top 10 race for pole. That would be... interesting. I can't see the teams going for that. I don't think there'll ever be two races on a Sunday in Formula 1. Sunday is main Grand Prix race day, isn't it? Always has been. I don't ever see that changing. Some interesting suggestions. So many ways it could go, but ultimately I'm quite happy with quali. If I could change anything from a race weekend, let's just cut back on Friday practice. There's just too much of it. If you include Saturday morning as well, is that 4 hours of practice? That's insane. Practicing what on tracks like Spain, exactly?
When they've already been in the simulator all week.
Exactly. It's absolutely. It's so unnecessary, the amount of practice we have. And as God love him, it's a lot of Crofty. It's a lot of Crofty as well. He's all right. Anyway, other thing I wanted to talk about, seeing as he's sort of on screen now, Daniel Ricciardo and Renault as he disappears to Lewis Hamilton. But anyway, there is a report doing the rounds that was originally taken from quotes by racefans.net. Definitely go check that article out. I forgot to link it, actually. I think it's one of the top stories on their website. I will say, great place for news. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Use your independence, definitely. But racefans.net are spot on. They've got an article there about Renault and how they want a young driver from their academy, is what they're looking at, in that car for 2021. Not at the end of 2021 for 2022, 2021. Esteban Ocon has just signed a 2-year deal which takes him to the end of 2021 at Renault. Daniel Ricciardo, this is all speculation, total silly season already. Could we see him without a seat in 2021 or a seat at Renault? Dan, what do you reckon to that story? Because it's an interesting one. If they're saying they want one of their young drivers in that car for the 2021 season, that spells the end at Renault for Daniel Ricciardo, which links me back to the whole Ferrari thing.
Yeah, I think no matter what, he'll be on the grid. I think unlike Hülkenberg, I mean, Ricciardo, race winner, multiple podiums, he's fine. He'll be in whatever team, just hopefully not Williams, bless him. I think, I've said this a few times since Ricciardo's gone to Renault. I personally think he went to Renault more as a place to bide his time a little bit, where if a seat opens up at Mercedes or Ferrari, it'll be easier to move from Renault to one of those teams than it would have been to move from Red Bull to one of those teams. I also think it just gave him a couple of years to not be matched up against Verstappen, to try and help bring a team that potentially could be in a championship fight in 21. You know, I don't want to rule Renault out, but I think it just gave him just a little bit of time just to get his head together, maybe be in the background a little bit in the midfield for a couple of years. So for Renault, maybe they've discussed that with Ricciardo. Maybe Ricciardo has said, look, if an opportunity comes up, I'd like to move on. We don't really know. But I think for Renault, Ocon and Ricciardo, that's a cracking lineup. I've got to say, and as much as I'm not Ocon's biggest fan, I don't think he's A-star material that some people think he is. I still think he's a really solid driver, and he's going to be right there with Ricciardo. So I think for the team, I was surprised this year that they've upset the balance. I suppose if they've done it now, they might do it again, but Ricciardo for me is one of the best in the midfield. And I think you look at some of the talent in their young drivers, the young driver academy, it's not quite there just yet. There's no one screaming out at me that would be able to replace a Ricciardo. So at the moment, I think he's fine. But Renault, it's definitely concerning that there's rumours at least.
Cyril Abitbol said it was important when given the opportunity to seize the opportunity of a complete driver in Daniel last year, and we don't regret that at Renault. He then went on to say, I think it's a trend actually you can see in several teams. We are also interested in young drivers with our academy. We hope and expect to have possibly one driver from that academy by 2021. So it's also a shift of dynamic to start really welcoming young drivers in our lineup. A lot of media have picked up on this, Stuart, and gone with, as I've kind of pushed out there, that we're looking at maybe Daniel Ricciardo on his way out in 2021. They could mean that they want one of their academy drivers as their reserve driver. Could.
Yeah, the comments made by Renault are a lot more woolly than some of the headlines.
That is a great word.
they were much more sort of speculative and talking about their long-term plans and maybe we'll want someone in. But I think the clear through line is Renault want to bolster their sort of junior driver train of being able to have these young drivers in line to move up into Formula One or other sports that they participate in. And they know they don't have that quite yet, and they're hoping that sort of by 2021 that'll be good to go. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll kick Ricciardo out, but again, as I actually agree very much with Dan that I think this is a Ricciardo biding his time era. I don't know whether that's the wisest choice, but I think he wasn't happy up against Verstappen at Red Bull, which is interesting because Red Bull are probably desperate for him to come back. Should he? They need someone kind of solid and reliable in that second car. They are struggling a little bit with, considering the size of their driver academy, they are struggling a bit. Yeah, I can't imagine Ricciardo sort of disappearing off the grid. I would be very interested to see where he was in 2021 if Renault did push to get a young driver in that car. But I can't imagine they're going to push too hard if they want to be making progress.
Yeah, I wanted to cover the story, and this is why I directed people to race fans. I was a bit tongue-in-cheek with it all because there are some that have gone with Ricciardo's seat under threat for 2021, and race fans are like, hey, this is what he actually said, which is why I kind of direct people in that direction. Actually, I'll tell you what I'll do super quickly while I remember. I'll just link in the description to the article under the links to Dan and Stuart's channel, and that way if anybody wants to have a read they can do. You will need to refresh your stream though for that to show up, but yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, bit of tongue-in-cheek there. I know there's a lot at the moment going on in the old F1 media world of people stealing stories and exaggerating quotes and whatnot, but it's worth the mention because there are some really good drivers in that Renault Academy. The only one I'm not sure on is Jack Aitken. Is he still in the Renault Academy?
I'm not an expert on that. Dan, do you know?
I think he is. Yeah. I don't sound like an expert either, do I?
Come on, Dan, you're supposed to be selling this. I thought he was, but I don't think
That seems to think so.
Yeah, I don't think he's actually listed on their academy page, and I now can't find it, which is sods. There's a picture of him, but I think I'm going to butcher his name. Guan Yu Zhu has been really good this year. He's definitely worth a mention for a shout out for a job at Renault in the future. There was one who I think was a potential shoe-in. Unfortunately, that's tragically now not going to happen in Antoine Hubert. Max Futrell, he's doing all right in F3, would you say? I wouldn't say he's been amazing. What do you reckon, Dan? I'm just trying to think of. He's been all right, hasn't he? He's one of those that you sort of look at and go, yeah, he's doing all right. He's got potential, but nothing headline making.
Yeah, nothing really standing out, is there? I don't think he's in the top 4 in the championship off the top of my head. So I'd like to see him maybe next year, if he stays in F3, really trying to push for a title. But no, nothing that really stands out, like you just say. Nothing like when Charles Leclerc coming through, or even George Russell. There's nothing that's really standing out to me in that academy.
He is apparently part of the academy, so there we go. People in chat saying that as well. Red Bull Sauber Petronas Lundgaard, he's in the academy. I know that he's been pretty good this year. So, yeah, I don't think F2, maybe controversy to some, is the strongest field we've had. It's certainly not the weakest field we've had. We've had some terrible F2 and GP2 fields in the past. It's not the strongest it's ever been, but there's still some properly good talent out there. Nick de Vries has landed himself a Formula E seat, so now people can stop asking me if he's going to get a seat in Formula 1 next year. He's off to Formula E, but I think there's some decent talent out there, Stuart, that can still keep growing, keep developing to become potential Formula 1. The problem is 20 seats, and there's all this young talent. Not everyone's going to make it, and some unfortunately are going to fall by the wayside, just get forgotten.
Yes, especially if you sort of focus the spotlight on Formula 1. A lot of people go through Formula 2 and do go somewhere and have successful careers, but not all of them end up in Formula 1, even if that was their goal. Which is why it's good that we've got other places like Formula E, like sports cars, that you may sort of start seeing them feed into. It's a topic for another time, I think, but the Formula 2 does have its own problems and how expensive it is and how tricky it is to get the right talent in those seats, because they also need to get £2 million worth of sponsorship. So, yeah, I mean, watching Formula 2, it's clear there's drivers sort of gearing up for next year in Formula 1 and the year after. You can sort of see the layers of drivers coming through that you'll sort of expect to see in the next few years, hopefully in Formula 1.
Yeah, I think we might do a junior Formula stream at some point. That'd be pretty cool, just to sit and natter a bit about some of the young talent coming through. Somebody in chat said we need 2 more teams. 22 was always a good amount of cars, says Marsh the Darsh. It's as long as those teams are competitive, you want them to come in like Haas did, really, don't you? Not right up there challenging for titles. Haas were not, obviously, but you don't want them to end up like HRT and Lotus, who became Caterham, obviously, and teams like that to be sort of chundering. No, that's not a word, is it? No,
chuntering.
That'll do. Chuntering around at the back. You don't really want that. Like I've said it before, 4 or 6 mobile chicanes. You want competitive teams that can fight in that midfield. That being said, Williams are still on the grid. Ouch. So yeah, do you think 12 teams, 24 drivers, Dan, or do you think that's too many, or would you go full 50 car grids?
Oh, that's interesting. 50 cars, that.
Trundling. Sorry, Dan. Yes, somebody in chat. Trundling, not chuntering around. Thank you. Carry on, Dan.
It's all right. I'll save you in chat. Yeah, I think 12 teams is a nice number. I think they've got that in Formula E this year. So I think that'll be a good judge. And like you say, back in 2010, it was 12 teams, wasn't it? And that was fine, but we didn't see 3 of them, to be honest. So yeah, I'm happy with 12, and I can only reiterate what we've just said, that they have to be competitive, though.
Yeah.
Because we want to see them. Williams this year, we've seen them on odd occasion, but we might as well have had 9 teams this year. But we do need more seats. So it's a dilemma. I mean, we've heard before 3-car teams. I think that's a little bit extreme. I don't necessarily want that. So no, I wouldn't be against a couple more.
Guardian of the Blind says 50-car race in Monaco. That would be absolute. Imagine that qualifying. That would be absolutely mental. Everyone's now correcting me in chat. All right, fine, whatever. I do want to stick with you for a second, though, Dan. Couple of reasons, actually.
Okay.
First of all, I did a video on Friday about Hülkenberg versus Grosjean. I'd put Hülkenberg in that car over Roman. Blah blah blah. If you didn't see that, please do go check it out. That'd be awesome. Few people pointing out, and it always surprises me, Romain Grosjean has had 10 penalties, more than 10 penalties, 10 podiums. That always catches me out. But people saying, how can anybody want to put Hulkenberg in that car over Grosjean when Grosjean's has been on the podium, but Hulkenberg has never been on the podium? By that logic, is Stroll a better driver than Hulkenberg?
This is I'm being backed into a corner here. I can't say anything. Nasty man. Grosjean's had his time. To be fair, yeah, I disagree with that logic. Hulkenberg, it would be criminal if he's not on the grid. I really do believe that. And I mean, last year, Hulkenberg, comfortably the best driver in that midfield in a Renault car, which, okay, ended up best of the rest, but wasn't every weekend. So I'll try and avoid your question there. But no, Hulk's got to be on the grid next year. He's better than a handful of drivers for sure, including Grosjean. Sorry.
I think, all joking aside, whichever way you look at it, Grosjean is not the driver he was when he was landing them podiums. He's also not in a car that was capable of doing that. He was brilliant. I've always said this about Grosjean, and it is praise. Brace yourself, it's praise.
Wow.
After his ban in 2012, he came back, not a completely different driver. He still had that aggressive streak, but he was so much calmer, and he started to deliver, and he had the pace, and he was picking up podiums, and he was fighting hard with Kimi. I'll never forget, I think it was in India one year when Kimi Räikkönen wasn't letting Grosjean through, and they came over team radio saying, Kimi, get the flipping heck out of the way. And Kimi's like, don't you shout at me, like Kimi does. Grosjean was putting him under pressure. He was a pretty decent driver, and that ban, it was stupid driving that got him it, but that ban was possibly one of the best things that could have happened to him. But he's not that driver anymore. And Stroll is definitely not better than Hulkenberg. I'll say it. He's definitely not. But the other reason why I stick with you, Dan, soppy sod that I am, I just want to say congratulations, mate, on 15k on your YouTube channel. I know you've been keeping an eye on that for a while, but you went through that the other day, and it's thoroughly well deserved, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on these streams, but also if you've not checked out Dan's channel, there's a link below. He makes some really good content. Basically, how he is here is exactly how he is in his content. So congratulations on that one, mate. It's another milestone ticked off.
Thanks, mate. I wasn't expecting that. I thought I'd said something wrong. I thought you were going to have a go at me for something. Put me in a corner again. Thank you. Probably a bit insignificant compared to you two giants, but thanks, mate. I appreciate it.
Ooh, giant, Stuart. That was nice, wasn't it?
Oh, that's great news, Dan. I need to keep an eye on your numbers from afar.
Oh, don't. There's too much pressure now.
I'll be watching you.
I was just going to say, I only know because I stalk him. That's like the only reason why.
Jeez, guys.
But yes, I think we'll leave it there. No, we won't. We'll take a couple of questions and we'll leave it there. It's only fair to involve the chat, otherwise there's no point being live. I'll do a refresh and we'll check the poll actually, and I'll let you know what percentages we're at. I would assume this is going to be close. Just waiting for it to refresh. There we go. It is going to be it is close. Yeah, well, decisions have been made over less. 53% say yes. Leave it, Sean. And 46% say no. Let's not go back down that road. I've fallen into that trap a few times. I think Stuart still got to edit something out that I said in his bingo update. That was the other thing. Bingo update, Stuart. People won't stop asking me. I just keep telling him you've got a lot of editing to do and to leave you alone. But
they're on your case as well, are they?
Oh, yeah.
They won't stop. Soon. In a sort of universal sense of the word.
He's got best part of 3 hours of eventual drunken audio to get through. So yeah, I don't envy you that one, mate. So yeah, leave him alone. He'll get it done. He'll get it done. Stroll is underrated, says Cameron N. Completely agree. Again, he's not a world beater, but he deserves a lot more credit than he gets. That's going to get me in trouble now. Hulkenberg has experience and will be more helpful to Haas to develop the car, says Idiot Box. That's, does he has... Well, Grosjean has a lot of experience. Who debuted first? Hulkenberg was 2010? Grosjean was 09, I think.
Yeah, but Grosjean then had 2 years out, didn't come back till 2012. So I think Hulkenberg's done more races.
Stardagger says, if you are the son of a billionaire and become an F1 driver, you are stupid. I think it's the opposite. You're very fortunate. Nicely said, Dan. He isn't like he was before that year-long break, says Annette. I'm not going to keep reading the Stroll comments. A lot of congratulations for you, Dan, on your 15K. Maximum 12 teams, says WXM 1967. Do you think Renault will catch McLaren for fourth, says Umar on cars? I took a big step towards it, didn't they, last time out, Stuart? Some surprisingly massive points in Monza. I think they're a lot closer than they were. I didn't think they would, but they've got an outside shot. But McLaren hopefully better in Singapore.
Renault are like a different team now, aren't they? They were falling over themselves to not score points in the first half. And if they really have turned up with something different and can take it to the rest of the season, then possibly McLaren would have had a slightly better run had Lando Norris finished Belgium and done one more lap. I can't definitively say whether Renault will catch them, but I think that's going to be a really exciting battle to watch for the rest of the year. At least I hope it is.
Yeah, it's just that midfield's been really good, but it'd be great to have a little almost mini title battle, wouldn't it, in that midfield? Ewan says, talk about no deal Brexit and the effect on F1. We did that in pre-season testing. It was one of the most awkward hours we did in that whole pre-season testing thing, Stuart. And I think I speak for everyone in the UK when I say we're sick of it. Let's just let's not talk about it anymore. Let's keep F1 a Brexit-free zone. But do go back and watch one of the testing streams. I'm not even going to try and find you a timestamp. There's about 32 hours to go through. But feel free to watch the full 32 hours if you really want to. We did discuss it in that one. It was awkward. Yeah. How important is recent experience after Steiner said Wehrlein has been out for too long? That's a very good point, actually. I did put it in the strap at the bottom, the news strap from David. Gunther Steiner was apparently approached by Pascal Wehrlein for that seat for next year. And essentially they made the decision not to take him because he's been out of F1 for 2 years. Well, the reason he's been out of F1 for 2 years is because nobody would pick him. It just feels incredibly harsh, but it also, I guess, Dan, highlights just how important it is to really stamp your claim in Formula One. You can't. Ocon's very lucky, I think, to be coming back. He could have easily been forgotten with all the young talent coming through, but I feel a bit for Wehrlein in that one because it's not his fault that he didn't have a seat for 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm a big fan of Pascal Wehrlein. I was a little bit disappointed when he didn't get that chance to Force India a couple of years ago, and it was Ocon that got the chance, although both of them very good drivers. I think if it wasn't Haas, and if it was a team like Alfa Romeo and they had a Kimi Räikkönen, I think then a couple of years out, they can probably be a little bit lenient. But I think for Haas at the moment, they just need someone who can be consistent. And I think that's something that both K-Mag and Grosjean just haven't been this year. And so I think they just need a little bit of stability. I'm going to say experience. I know Grosjean and K-Mag have experience, but just a calm head. And they just don't want to try and rock the boat too much. So I think if it was a different team, it'd be a different story. But yeah, Wehrlein, unlucky, I think. Just it hasn't gone his way in his career.
Owen says Carter Kane had like 6 years out. Pascal to win the FE title next year. Who's he racing? Is he racing for anybody yet next year? Have we got anything confirmed?
No, not yet.
That's concerning for him. That's worrying that he's then gone to F1 and asked for a seat. I'd like to think, with all due respect to Formula E, he'd probably go to F1 first and then try and sort his other stuff out. 1 hour qualifying is perfect. It'd be a mistake to meddle with it, says Mo Khan. I'm going to take a couple of questions. We'll do quick fire, but I'll try not to drop anybody in it. Let's see if I can find. I did see a really good question a moment ago, and it's gone. I can't see your name, but Stuart, who's going to get that Red Bull seat next season alongside Max Verstappen? Assuming Max stays, he will. But
that is the question, isn't it? I can see them hanging on with Albon and then possibly dumping him in the summer when they realise he's not Max Verstappen, as is their way. They sort of, their second driver sort of has a different season. He sort of goes from like August to August. I think if I had to put money on it, I would say Albon, but I think it could even go to Kvyat, to be honest.
Dan?
Here's your hot take for the episode.
Oh,
I'm
God.
saying Hulkenberg. I think
Ooh.
Hulkenberg's got it. Yeah, there you go. I think they just need someone who's going to be consistent. And Albon, I think he's been great in his first 2 races. Don't get me wrong, but he's got a little bit lucky in the sense that he started at the back in Spa. Verstappen started at the back last time out in Monza. So next time out in Singapore, where the car is on the pace, that's where we're really going to judge him. And I think he's a great driver. I just think he'll get moved back to Toro Rosso next year against either Gasly or Kvyat, however that pans out. And I think they'll go with Hulkenberg, but that's a hot take for you.
Totally nothing to do with the fact that would keep Grosjean on his seat, no?
Nothing to do with that at all. You know me too well.
Actually, I'll ask a question. I just do nothing but ask questions, but why not? I did say in my video on Friday, if I were in Haas's position, I would wait and see what happens at Red Bull, because you might find that a Daniel Kvyat might become available, and I think he'd be a bloody good signing for Haas to really build around long term. What do you reckon to that, Dan?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, even I've said a few times, I think Grosjean, as we've said, he's past it now, bless him, and I'm not too convinced about K-Mag. So I think they need to look at someone like a Kvyat who isn't too old, plenty of experience. So yeah, if they could get a Kvyat Hulkenberg lineup, that'd be brilliant.
Do you think Hulkenberg to Haas, Stuart? Do you think him partnering Magnussen is just asking for trouble? Because I'd like to think they're both professional enough to just get on with it, but if they're concerned by Grosjean and Magnussen running into each other, they've got a better relationship than Hulkenberg and Magnussen do, if you listen to those in the know, in air quotes.
I know they have history, but I don't think they. I don't need to be super concerned about those two. I mean, Haas may seem like the team that do seem to look for trouble in all aspects of their operation, but the thing is, they're both pretty solid drivers, and I think as a midfield team, those are the two kind of drivers you would want in both of your seats, and I think Haas would feel that they could manage those drivers. I would like to think you could manage those drivers. I think if you get them onto the same page working together, they should be fine. That's my optimistic point.
Cool. No, I'd like to think, as I say, they're both grown up enough and mature enough to work together for the best of the team. But then I'd like to think that Magnussen and Grosjean were, and they've had their moments this season. So I mean, look, they're fast-ish drivers. They're racing close on a track. There's going to be contact, but hitting your teammate is never okay in F1. I mean, from my point of view, I absolutely love Magnussen and Hulkenberg together, because I think that sets us up very nicely for a very, very tasty inter-team battle. I'd love to see that. And I'll tell you what as well, it might, if Magnussen came out on top in that one, that might change a few people's opinions on Hulkenberg and on Magnussen. A lot of people don't think he's all that good. I think Magnussen is, I've said Magnussen 16 times in 2 seconds. I think K-Mag is far better than people give him credit for. I'd be quite up for that one. Roman's a nice guy and all that, Dan, but I can't see him keeping his seat unless Haas do decide to stick until 2021 and get that car sorted first. Who knows? It's a lot of ifs and buts at the moment. Not many seats still open, actually, for next year, is there? So, yeah, silly seasons dying down and already starting to ramp up for 2021. That many drivers out of contract next year. It's going to be fascinating, but we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Dan, for coming along, mate. I was careful on the Grosjean bashing. It wasn't too bad today.
Debatable. You've put me in some difficult positions today, but nevertheless, mate, thanks for having me.
No worries, mate. A pleasure as always. And again, congratulations on your 15k. Let's get you to 20. Make sure you subscribe to Dan if you haven't already.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's all shy now. He doesn't know what to say. I'm embarrassing. I'll leave it. But thank you very much, Dan, mate. And also, thank you, as always, Stuart. It's been a while since we've properly spoken on one of these, so it was nice to sit and natter for a bit.
Yeah, I think one thing or another has sort of put us in wrong place at the wrong time. It's good to be back and just natter it.
Yeah. I mean, if you called me back from time to time, it'd be great.
Not on the stream.
That got weird. Anyway, yeah, thank you very much, Stuart. And I'm sure I'll talk to you both very shortly.
See you later.
Yes.
We'll mute those. Thank you very much to Dan and Stuart, and to you guys as well for popping along. We got there in the end. Do you know what? I'm going to go into streams from now on with no structure at all. It was much more fun when we just started chatting, like I said earlier. So I just wanted to cover all bases with the Ferrari stuff because I know what will happen if I don't. You know what the internet is like, people. But yes, thank you for coming along. Singapore is next. Should be a good race. Night race as well. So it's always a spectacle. I always enjoy Singapore, if nothing else, for that. So going to be interesting to see who can do what. But there will be a preview for that out next week now, is it? This coming week, rather, probably around Thursday. That one will be out. And then next weekend, all the usual content. So we'll have the qualifying watch along, the race watch along, the race reaction, the debrief, and all of that sort of thing as well to enjoy together. We'll just chill and watch some F1, which I always enjoy doing. In the meantime, though, don't forget that you can follow me over on social media. All of the links you need for that and the links to Stuart and to Dan's channel are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.